You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to another Colts Blue Zone podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. The Indianapolis Colts 2023 draft class is complete. Joe Hopkins has finally stopped doing his backflips over picking Anthony Richardson 4th overall, just in time to join us here inside the podcast studio. Joe, tell me your reaction, first of all. Everyone who's listened to this podcast knows that Anthony Richardson has been your pick for basically 3 months, ever since we began our draft previews here on the podcast. What was your reaction to hearing his name come out there from the commissioner in pick 4?
Relief. I had kind of mentally prepared myself for Will Levis, just because, it's not every day that the Colts come away with draft picks that I want. Usually Chris Ballard picks his guys, and a lot of times that's for the better because they work out.
How selfish of him.
I know. But I was relieved that the Colts went with the guy who I think is going to be the better quarterback. So it was pretty great evening for me.
Well, we will run down the Colts draft pick by pick, selection by selection, give our analysis, some grades of the draft as a whole, our opinions so far. So let's just start at the top of the draft. Let's jump right in as what's the word that I'm thinking of? The expected number 1 pick. Bryce Young does go to Carolina, number 1. Frank Reich, there was the smoke around Bryce Young was that Frank Reich liked tall quarterbacks, which he's had tall quarterbacks in the past, but that doesn't mean he only likes tall quarterbacks. So the Carolina Panthers decide to marry Frank Reich with Bryce Young. He gets what he didn't get in Indy, which is a consistent quarterback, and we'll see what happens there in Carolina with Bryce Young headed there.
Isn't it safe to say that all the time the last month we were talking about the smoke, everything was smoke, except Bryce Young. The last 3 or 4 weeks, that's who it was.
It started to get more consistent.
Everything else was smoke. Levis to the Colts. Houston's not taking a quarterback. It was all smoke, which is what it generally is, which makes it, what you sort of enjoy to a degree about it. But we'll get into it. But what's really crazy is how things might have changed had Houston not gone from 12 to 3.
What an insane trade to jump up for Houston. To get the 2nd and 3rd pick in this draft, Houston takes C.J. Stroud, first of all, at number 2. And then they trade back up from 12 to 3 to draft Will Anderson. Certainly a pick that I'm sure their new head coach, DeMeco Ryans, loves to have on his defense.
So some of that smoke was warranted. That it was like, Houston could take a defensive player here. Well, they did both, turns out.
We know that they loved Will Anderson enough to give up a first-round pick next year, which is probably going to be a top 5 pick overall, a 3rd-round pick next year, and their 2nd pick in the 2nd round this year. So they moved up 9 spots.
And their first-round pick this year.
And
well, they flipped.
Well, yeah, right. They gave up. Right, they gave up 9. They moved up 9 spots. You're right. Sorry. So they give up 12th overall, 33rd overall, and then their 1st round and 3rd round next year to get up to 3. Yes,
it's a lot.
It's quarterback numbers is what they paid to go up and get Will Anderson. I was stunned when I saw their name pop back up.
It's because they had to go up so far.
Exactly.
So the Colts wouldn't have had to give up that much to go up 1 spot.
Oh, totally. But I'm saying it's quarterback numbers because that's what you pay to get a quarterback. Like, it's not what you pay to get a defensive end. Not from what I've seen before watching the draft. So I was stunned when I saw Houston jump back up to that number 3 spot. And immediately when they did, if you're a Colts fan, you're thrilled, probably. In spite of Houston, your conference rival, getting 2 really good players in this draft, you're thrilled that nobody else jumped up, because then you can take your pick, either Richardson or Levis, whoever it was that Ballard and company eventually came to an agreement on.
Well, and there's so many different ways the dominoes could have fallen. I saw reports that if C.J. Stroud made it to 3, Tennessee was going to trade up to number 3, because we saw the report before the draft that Tennessee was in talks to acquire that pick. And then once Stroud was drafted number 2 by Houston, they were kind of out. We've seen reports that kind of indicate there's a darn good chance that Seattle would have taken Richardson at 5 had he still been available there. So a lot of different ways this draft could have gone. I think Houston, we'll see how it turns out. I mean, even if Will Anderson is a really good player, this is a team with a lot of different needs. And for them to give up that much draft capital, I mean, Anderson's going to have to turn into a multi-year all-pro player to be worth that kind of selection.
We'll get into it on the Richardson pick, but it's amazing to me how, like you said, how things could have changed, because the Colts told us how nervous they were until the trade was made. Mm-hmm. The problem I have, okay, they made it very clear that Richardson was their guy. They had settled on him for the last
month or so, is what Ballard said, yeah.
So you weren't convinced at the time to trade with Chicago. That you weren't sure. But you were darn sure that you wanted him at 4, and you were apparently willing to lose him at 3. If you were that sure, why didn't they make a strong effort to go to 3? You know, it worked out fine. But I thought it was, if they're that much in on him, boy, go up and get him at 3.
Here's what I didn't get about this scenario, and I promise we're going to talk plenty about Anthony Richardson. Don't worry, folks. Like, the Colts said that they had talked to the Cardinals. That's what Ballard said after the draft. Said they had talked to the Cardinals about acquiring that 3rd overall pick. Why wouldn't the Cardinals let the Colts trade up with them and then trade with Houston again to acquire whatever the Colts were going to give them?
Double dip
because
on it.
you knew that the Texans weren't going to take a quarterback, and you knew that the Colts were going to take a quarterback. So both of them would have gotten their guys. Arizona would have just gotten whatever the Colts would have given them extra to move up one spot. I don't care if it's a 3rd or a 4th round pick, but it would have been something that they would have acquired to move back one spot, and then they could have traded with Houston again. So it just made very little sense to me what happened from a an Arizona Cardinals standpoint. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Do you hear what I'm saying?
Agreed.
I mean, I think at a certain point, Ballard, he said they did have intel, and he probably trusted his sources and kind of had to call other teams' bluff.
Yeah, that's possible.
And they must have had to have liked Will Levis enough that if...
Well, remember Irsay said.
Yeah, probably would have taken Levis.
They would have taken Levis. And just a side note, with all these machinations and things that didn't happen, as the 4th pick, Richardson gets a 4-year deal, $35 million guaranteed, with a 5th-year option. Will Levis at number 33 gets $8 million, and I think $5 million is guaranteed. So quite a fall
difference
from grace and financially for Will Levis.
I was surprised that he fell that far. I know it got to the point where the teams with the huge gaping hole at quarterback, the really big need, we got past them.
Right.
I kind of kept waiting for some team to trade
Minnesota.
up. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nope.
They went wide receiver. I kept waiting for some team to trade up, and then Tennessee eventually did in round 2, but they didn't like him enough to take him at 12. I mean, it just kind of goes to show what the league as a whole thought of Will Levis.
Well, let's get into Anthony Richardson, because the Colts thought a whole heck of a lot of him after putting in all the work, because they drafted him number 4 overall, the 6'4", 244-pound former Florida Gator, 20 years old right now, turns 21 just this month, this May in 2023. The greatest athletic testing quarterback in the history of the NFL Combine is coming to Indianapolis. In many ways, it is a Chris Ballard pick, because it's a guy with traits. It's a guy with athletic traits, which we'll get into further as we get deep into this class, because boy, it's a highly athletic draft class, which you would expect. But Richardson is the most the most of all of them, out of all of them. He was a 10. Exactly, a 10 on the RAS scale. If you guys don't know what RAS is, you need to know what RAS is. I'm talking to you guys, the listeners. Those of you who download, subscribe to our Colts Blue Zone podcast. Obviously, you guys are you are into getting a little bit more information than the typical than just the typical perusing a website, because you've downloaded our podcast, you're listening to us. If you want to take another step, you need to know what an RAS score is. It is a relative athletic score, where basically what you're doing is you're combining all these testing numbers from the shuttle, 3-cone drill, 40-yard dash from the combine, exactly, like bench press, your height, your weight, all those things together to produce one score, one number. It's on a 0 to 10 scale. And if you get a 10, You are literally the highest graded player at that position in the history of the combine. It goes back to like 1987, I believe, is when this RAS
because
score.
you're dealing in numbers, and the numbers are the numbers.
Numbers don't lie. Yeah, exactly. Numbers are ironclad. And this doesn't say that Anthony Richardson is going to be the most successful quarterback in NFL history, but it does say that out of every quarterback who is tested athletically between 1987 and today, he posed the highest score. So the best overall numbers, according to this metric, which has been a metric that the Colts have used, because their average RAS score for this draft was something like a 9.4, which is ludicrously high. And it's the reason that I put out a mock draft earlier, which was an all RAS mock draft. I talked about it on this podcast a couple weeks ago. I hit 3 picks that the Colts made because I know what an RAS score is. If you out there don't know what an RAS score is, you need to get into it. You need to learn it because the Colts put serious stock into athletic traits that players have. I hit on Richardson there in the first round. I hit on Julius Brents in the second round. And I hit on Jake Witt, their 7th-round tackle pick that nobody had ever heard of. Why had I heard of him? Because he had a great RAS score. That's how I knew or had an idea what the Colts might be looking for. But Anthony Richardson, among every quarterback ever who was tested at the Combine, had the best RAS score out of all of them. So, Joe, it's a unique player that is coming here to Indy with all the things that he needs. What he already has are things that really can't be taught, all the physical traits that he has, which is what immediately has scouts' eyes popping out of the back of their heads if they ever see him at practice or in a game.
Yeah, just follow @MathBomb on Twitter for all the RAS information. It tweets out about probably every player in every draft. But Richardson, and we've been talking about this for months, is freakishly athletic, the most athletic quarterback to enter the NFL, at least based on testing. And, you know, the concerns with him, just 1-year starter at Florida, extremely young, 17 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 53.8% completions. Those are the concerns, that you're not getting a finished product. But, boy, do you have a ball of clay to work with. And the thing that really, you know, there's some athletic prospects, but there's usually a but behind them. Richardson's buts are more so just like he hasn't played a whole lot of football, because in every interview I've seen, every report on the guy, high character, extremely motivated, loves football, great work ethic. Like, those are the guys you want to bet on, with great mental makeup and physical makeup. Like, it's just, unless injuries or something like that happens, it's just hard to see these guys fail. Maybe he never reaches his absolute full potential, which is what, best quarterback in the NFL, potentially, you know, based on his athleticism. But I have a hard time seeing him failing and being a bad quarterback that you can't win with.
One thing that Ed Dodd told us after the draft, he said, on why they go after these traits, he said they believe that some guys are too big and too fast to fail. They just think of, you know, if you add that to the guy, again, his football athletic ability, that you've really limited the risk as much as you can. And it's just really amazing. Like, I think 10 of the 12 draft picks were 9.0 or better.
Yep.
So they bank on that. They do. Now, one of them, somebody rated, well, he's a great athlete, or he's a great RAS guy, but he's not a great football player. Daniel Scott, maybe, one of them. Mm-hmm. But this is all about limiting the risks. And they think they've done that by continually relying on sheer athletic ability.
Chap, this pick really shows the change in the NFL, obviously, from one era to another, because Bill Polian would rather quit and storm out of a building, I think, than to draft a 1-year starter quarterback that completed 53.8% of his passes in his 1 year, regardless of anything else that has to do with his athleticism.
He gave a good review.
Well,
for
now he does,
afterwards.
but I'm talking about 20 years ago.
Well, again, one of the neatest times is the Colts bring in the scouts post-draft. We talked to
That's great, yeah.
Morocco Brown, Ed Dodds, and four other scouts. And we were talking, and I asked Ed Dodds a couple times, can you compare the evaluation of Richardson to anyone else? And they really can't because of the lack of experience. And he sort of said, I went into it with a negative mindset because the guy's played 13 games. And it's really hard. As a longtime scout, you want to trust your eyes. And you talk to it's game tape. Let's go back to the game tape. Well, there's not much game tape. So they I guess they sort of had to trust their eyes that what they were seeing was real when you really couldn't go back and reinforce it with game tape. Because even the 13 game tapes, all of them weren't that great. What was he, 6 and 7 as a starter? Mm-hmm. So there was bad game tape. But, and we'll get to it further on, but I saw something on Twitter today where somebody said, well, if Richardson doesn't pan out, Ballard's going to be run out of town. Well, that was going to be the case regardless.
Right, doesn't matter
Whichever quarterback they took.
They could have taken Bryce Young.
Anybody, his future here and his reputation will be tied to this quarterback. So, I remember Bobby Beathard, great former GM, and sort of his black mark is Ryan Leaf.
Yep.
That's how it is. When you're in this position, whoever you draft at this position with quarterback is going to rise and fall with how he does.
And that's what Chris has said over the years when we've been hounding him. Like, when are you going to solve this
You
QB
guys are going to
thing?
get
He's
all,
like,
I'll get you all off my
You guys
ass.
will love it.
And then you're going to run me out of town if it doesn't work.
Yep, he's not wrong.
Yeah. Just going back to Richardson, his limited experience. I mean, new offense every year at Florida. In that new offense, he got better as the year went on. 0 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions his first 3 games. Last 3 games, 8 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions. So that's what you want to see. I mean, he's basically a rookie out there. And if you watch a rookie, if you see them get better as the season goes on, you feel pretty good about that next year, that their best football is ahead of them. And that's what Chris Ballard said about Richardson, that his best football is ahead of him.
They said we drafted him for the quarterback he can be in the future.
Right.
Which was a great quote. Mm-hmm. This guy's not Superman yet. And we need to get into it about how the power brokers out there, Irsay, Steichen, and Ballard, were sort of walking that fine line about what's next. How soon? Mm-hmm. How soon does he play?
It sure sounds like they want him to play as soon as possible because
as much as Chris Ballard tried to stay away from that.
Right. The other two were like, well, he needs to play. He needs experience.
Reps. What Irsay he said practice and practice reps and preseason and sitting in the meeting room is really important, but you got to play.
Yep.
Go back to 98 and I realize you can't compare quarterbacks. Manning was...
But we will anyway.
But Manning was different. He was just different. From the day he walked in the building, he was different. He played all 982 snaps his first year. He took all of the snaps the first 2 years. So they said we're going to sink and swim with Peyton Manning.
I think it's wild the amount of people after this draft selection to ask me, do you think he plays year one? Of course he's going to play year one.
Definitely.
He's a 4th overall pick. He's super athletic. He's smart. Like the real question is, does he play week 1? Mm-hmm. And I think the only question regarding that is, does he get the playbook down enough to be able to adjust protections at the line of scrimmage if he needs to and make those kind of calls? And if not, give Minshew a few weeks until he gets there. And then, I would say the absolute tops. Richardson, goes 5 weeks without playing. Like, I don't think we even get to midseason. I think maybe a month, and then Richardson's in there at the most.
If they have an early bye, then maybe, like Gardner starts the first 5-6 games.
What if he's winning?
There you go. That's an interesting question. So
if you're winning, don't fix
don't
it.
mess with success.
Somebody mentioned that
I wouldn't bet on that, though.
You hear all these things. Well, as long as he's not going to hurt the team, you play him. Well, my point is, as long as the team's not going to hurt him. So, you've got to come out of preseason knowing how you feel about your offensive line, which wasn't very good last year.
Right.
Maybe that's a good reason to start Minshew week 1. Just kind of see how it does.
How are we
kind
doing
of test the waters.
Yeah.
Because the fact, and again, people say, well, he's got this mobility. He can run away from sacks. Those guys a lot of times run into sacks. So I think it's going to be, and how many times did Irsay mention simplified offense so that he can play? if they think he's got a good grasp of what they're doing and they can keep him from getting David Card as a rookie, maybe he starts, because there's no doubt in my mind that Gardner Minshew will be the better prepared quarterback in week one. Mm-hmm. Just because he's played 2 years in Steichen's system, but listen to Steichen, listen to Irsay, and sort of listen to Ballard, but the other two guys really made it clear, reps, that's what you need. And if they believe he can function and they can keep him out of harm's way as much as you can with a quarterback, this kid might play right away.
And the quarterbacks he's been compared to most often through this process are Cam Newton and Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, because he was similar in college, highly scrutinized, not the most accurate. First of all, let me say, if Josh Allen was playing in the SEC, he would have been even less accurate than he was at Wyoming. His numbers would have been far less than Anthony Richardson's. So,
this is like his 7th year.
Josh Allen, he's up there now. Like he was in the Quinton draft class, wasn't he? Yeah. So I mean, Josh Allen's first year, he did not start week 1. But then he started week 2, I think. Like he came in at the end of that week 1 game just to get a little smoke. And he was like, okay, let's start in week 2. Here he goes. The era has begun. It was just like that. I'm pretty sure Cam Newton started from day 1, which was not surprising since he was the first overall pick there. So you look at those two, and you say that the starting is going to happen sooner rather than later. I'm convinced of that.
Well, and just looking at what Josh Allen did in year 1, 2,000 passing yards, 52.8% completions, 10 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, but he also ran for 600 yards and 8 touchdowns.
And that's why Chris Ballard cautioned not to crown Anthony Richardson ending yet, and early on, it might not be pretty. Because if you're comparing it to Josh Allen, who is an MVP-type candidate now, and he was after they got Stephon Diggs, by the way, in his 3rd year. What was his 2nd year like, Josh Allen? Do you have that in front of you, too?
Second year, he goes to 3,000 passing yards. Completions percentage goes up to 58.8. Touchdown to interception ratio goes up to 20-9.
That's still not very good, like in his 2nd year as a passer in the NFL.
And then, boom, year 3, 69% completions, 4,500 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. If everything goes right with Richardson, it's kind of the projection we're looking at. Year after year growth, and then kind of meeting that potential that he has.
So Colts fans should be in it for the long haul right now, be okay to struggle for a couple years. And hey, you get some higher draft picks those years to build some more talent around him, for crying out loud. Like, you should not expect this team to be all that competitive this year, but you should expect to have some fun watching this young kid. Like, if there's no number one obvious, if there's no Peyton Manning, if there's no Andrew Luck, if there's no Trevor Lawrence, that's the obvious number 1 overall pick that seems like a polished prospect who's ready to go in spite of the Jacksonville Jaguars trying to ruin somebody.
By the way, the Bills went 10-6 in year 2 of Josh Allen.
Yeah. So, like, if there's not that the best thing to have is the guy that you're most excited about a future. And Anthony Richardson has it scares you, yes, but at the same time excites you about the future. There's no better pick that Colts fans could have had, knowing that the immediate future is not the best, than Anthony Richardson, because you can get pumped for 4 or 5 years down the road, or the possibility of it.
You always enjoy talking to Jim Irsay because he always just throws things out there. And again, these guys are going to want to win as much as they can this year, because
that's what they always
do. DeForest Buckner wants to. He doesn't want to go 4-13.
Nope.
But it's funny, we were talking with her, saying, he said, I had a long talk with Marvin Harrison. And he made it clear they weren't talking about the quarterback. They were talking about Marvin Jr. So have a bad year and all of a sudden get a top 5 pick, and look who might be there. Marvin Jr. So, but as we've talked about, and you mentioned it, this pick is not about 2023.
No.
It's just not. Whatever they do this year, you want this quarterback, this kid 20 years old, to grow and get better. Remember, Peyton Manning was 3-13, and he had a better offense around him coming back. So you're going to struggle. You just are. But the important thing is to get the guy reps, get him starts, and then 2024, you should be really set to compete for something.
And it depends on the AFC South at that point, because right now, if the Jaguars are for real, maybe they put another year together. And it's hard to bet on the Jaguars being real just because you never know.
We've been down that road before.
Yeah, whether they go to the AFC Championship or to 3rd and 13 defensive conversion away from going to the Super Bowl.
So much is up in the air in the division. C.J. Stroud,
Will Levis. Yeah.
How do this division for the next 5 to 10 years
very intriguing
will come down to how these quarterbacks pan out. Mm-hmm. Because is one of these quarterbacks going to rise to the level to compete with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars for that division title, to be the king of the AFC South? And if one or two can, the man is shaping up to be a very competitive and fun to watch division for several years.
And we've talked about the AFC itself. I mean, you can rattle off 6 or 7 guys that don't include Aaron Rodgers.
Yep. Young
quarterbacks. And that's why they had to come out of this with a quarterback that you can say this. They're saying we hope this is our guy, but that this is our guy, and you believe it. And if it works, Chris Ballard's going to be here a long time. If it doesn't, he probably won't be, which is that's the job description.
And man, I'll just say, Colts fan, we've waited for this. Mm-hmm. We've waited for it ever since. This is the most excited I've been about the Colts since Andrew Luck was here.
Yep.
We finally got a cool young quarterback. He can run. He can do all the things. We're not watching Phillip Rivers in the pocket. We're not watching Carson Wentz throw left-handed passes or Matt Ryan fumble every time he's breathed on. We finally have an athletic, cool young quarterback who can do all the things imaginable. When's the last time the Colts, since Andrew Luck, had a quarterback that you would want to play in Madden? Mm-hmm. Now Anthony Richardson, you can run all over the field and do all those awesome things. This is an exciting time to be a Colts fan.
I just find it funny the Colts drafted a guy that he hits the big plays and he needs to work on the layups. He's maybe more athletic than the average quarterback. He's a big dude. And
don't you dare bring me down.
I just find it hilarious. I just find it hilarious. No. That's not really a good comparison. I'm very much talking tongue in cheek right now. Before anybody gets at me right now.
One thing that was brought up by
I'm just trying to get under Joe's skin and succeeding.
Yeah.
But it was brought up when they brought in Richardson on Friday. There were like 9 family members / colleagues with him.
Get a big entourage along with him.
And a good portion is coming with him.
Yep.
He made it very clear that what mom, stepdad, brother, agent, and manager, whatever you want to call it, will be here because he understands the importance of having a strong supporting cast around him.
I wonder where his little brother's going to go to high school. Play ball up here. Let's go. Somebody's going to want him. Cathedral's going to want him.
Beach Grove. Beach Grove. We need talent.
Let's go.
I know people.
Chappell has some places he could stay down there.
But he made it very clear that it keeps him grounded, and that just shows a maturity that maybe a lot of guys don't have. So he wants to do things the right way because a lot's going to be against him. There's going to be a lot against him. But give yourself the absolute best chance to succeed, and that's what he's trying to do.
Well, to have the best chance to succeed, you need some good players alongside your starting quarterback. So the Colts go into the second round. They had the 35th overall pick, 4th into the second round. But
we knew they weren't going to keep
absolutely no one's surprise, Chris Ballard traded that one away. And then to absolutely no one's surprise, he traded the next pick at 38 away.
Thank you, sir. Might have another one.
Indeed, which, like I said, 0% surprising. Maybe what was surprising later is he didn't trade any more around, trying to move back up. The Colts made 12 picks in this draft. 12
Somebody
picks.
told him 12 is the limit.
Yeah, it must have. They picked 13 back in 1992, back when the draft was
there
much
were 12
longer.
rounds.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why they picked 12.
This is the most in a 7-round draft and the most against since 13 that year. So
I was very busy with the live blog this past week.
Yeah, no kidding. He gave us a lot to do. Finally, the Colts get back on the clock at 44th overall. They draft cornerback Julius Brents. Juju is his nickname, what he goes by. Juju Brents out of Kansas State. Played his high school ball here in central Indiana on the east side of Indianapolis at Warren Central. He is 6'3", 200 pounds. Big guy, 34-inch arms. That is large for a cornerback. Not the most impressive 40 at 4'5", but if you're a 6'3" cornerback, that's still a pretty tall guy that the quarterback has to throw over down the sideline. So you can get away with running a 4'5" if you're 6'3", playing cornerback in the league, and he's a guy that fits into Gus Bradley's system, the type of player you want. Had 4 interceptions last year when he was named first team All Big 12. Right now has a broken wrist. Is looking to be ready by training camp, which Chris Ballard told us, Chap, that he will be ready by training camp. But this starts a couple more cornerbacks the Colts would take, which we'll get into later, filling a glaring need the Colts had this offseason here with Juju Brents in the second round.
I think what's important about the injury is it's its hand. It's not a broken foot. It's not a hammy. It's not, a groin where you can't do
Heck, you
motion.
can play corner with a ball around your wrist.
With a club on it.
Yeah, just whack it away.
Because he said all he can't do is punch.
Right.
Okay, but he can be ready. And we knew that corner was going to be a prime position. We wondered would it be corner receiver, receiver corner. Well, we found out, and 2 more to go with it. We talked about that room. The corner room is such a thin room. Mm-hmm. So who knows how these guys develop, but can't you see Juju out there in week 1?
I absolutely can see him out there in week 1.
I'd almost be surprised if he wasn't, to be honest. It starts the run of Gus Bradley really getting his kind of cornerbacks in the building. That's not something he had last year, and that's what I would suspect to be a big reason why we didn't see more Isaiah Rodgers. We were wondering week after Faison kept struggling, why not Rodgers? Why not Rodgers? Well, he's small. He's 5'10". He doesn't fit the scheme of Gus Bradley. Juju Brents absolutely does. A 4.53. He's not going to shock anybody or wow anybody, but it's plenty fast for a quarterback. Vontae Davis, one of the best corners in Colts history, ran in the 4.5s as well. And then the rest of his testing was excellent. Vertical, 41.5-inch vertical, 11-foot, 6-inch broad jump, 6'6", 3-cone. The broad and 3-cone were the best among corners in the combine, and the vertical was the second best. His relative athleticism score, RAS score, was a 9.99.
That means like one person ever.
So he wasn't perfect.
He was, yeah, that's right.
And it was the 40.
Yeah.
It was a 40.
Mm-hmm,
But
that's why.
For a guy to be 6'3", give you that much length, and then the 6.633 cone, which tests for your agility and ability to change directions, that's rare to be that lengthy, that tall, and be able to change directions that quickly. We're really high on Juju. We talked about him leading into the draft. I mean, the first, really first couple days of the draft, we nailed in talking about Anthony Richardson, trade back at the top of round 2. Brents was someone that we both highlighted specifically. And then we talked about wide receiver. It could be a bunch of different guys, but we specifically talked about a quick, fast slot receiver, and that's exactly what they got in round 3.
Everybody got picked 79. The Colts draft wide receiver Josh Downs out of North Carolina, who turns out was Reggie Wayne's favorite wide receiver in this whole draft, Chap. But when Reg goes up to Chris Ballard and says,
combine.
Says, man, this Josh Downs, I'm looking at him, he's just incredible. Like that's got to perk my ears up if I'm Chris Ballard, and I think they're very, very fortunate to get Josh Downs at 79 overall, because I saw a couple of other mocks here and there that had him going much, much higher.
I was shocked. I thought the Colts might take him with their second-round pick.
At the 44 overall for sure, and Pro Football Focus had him ranked the fifth best wide receiver on their draft boards. His last 2 years at North Carolina were exceptionally productive, and I know the ACC is not the SEC, but there's no slouches in the ACC either. There's some really great players, really great corners at Syracuse, at Miami, at Virginia Tech. So this guy's not going up against MAC competition. Downs was incredibly productive the last 2 years, and he fits another need the Colts had, because you have some big guys on the outside with Pittman, who you really like, and Pierce, who you want to take a next step. How do you get some rookie on the field? You draft a guy with a different skill set. Downs certainly is that.
Which doesn't that tell you maybe this is Shane Steichen's influence? In what's important is the GM listening to his head coach / offensive guy
/ wide receivers coach as well, maybe.
Right.
Perhaps.
This is the kind of guy, and receivers coach as well. This is the kind of guy I need. He told reporters at the owners' meetings he likes a versatile receivers room, and this is sort of a TY guy in the room. And again, they signed Isaiah McKenzie this guy's more. This guy's more than that. So we talked. The important thing was when you're going to go with a young guy, give him parts around him, and that this is a major part around him.
Yeah, I love Downs. He's only 5'9", 170, but he was a great contested catch receiver in college. Excellent hands, great route runner, very quick, and he tested well. 4.48 40-yard dash. It is still solid. It's not slow out there. He had a 38.5-inch vertical, so that shows his explosiveness. AP All-American in 2022. 19 touchdowns over the past couple of years, so he got it done in the red zone as well. Chris Ballard talked about how they were trying to trade up to draft him. They had all those 5th and 4th round picks. They were trying to trade up to draft him for about the last 20 picks, weren't able to do it, and he considers himself fortunate that Downs fell to them at 79.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to. I think out of all the picks in this entire draft, the Josh Downs picks was my favorite out of all of them because of I think the value they got there, the need they got. And I think he can be incredibly valuable for a young quarterback and just a different skill set than just the big guys on the outside. I love this pick.
I'm right there with you. Love Juju, but he was expected to go around that range. Love Richardson. Yeah. Obviously, that's my favorite pick.
Of course.
When we're talking about value, and they had other great value picks as well, but I just love what Downs can do at wide receiver from day one. He might start, and if he doesn't, he's going to at least split time with McKenzie.
Well, and if you're right on him and certainly Richardson, this is a young receiver group to grow with your quarterback.
Yep.
Pittman's not an old man, and Pierce second year, so this is how really, really good offenses get really, really good as they grow together.
Day 3 of the NFL draft. We go on to round 4. The Colts have made 3 picks so far, 1 in each round. Now they start stacking them, stacking picks. Early in round 4, they select offensive tackle Blake Freeland out of BYU. Freeland is a monster of a human being. At 6'8", 300 pounds, 33 7/8 in his arms. Couldn't quite hit that 34, Joe. Was ever so close. But at the Combine, ran a sub-5 second 40, was the 3rd best among offensive linemen. Was, again, the highest athletic RAS testing offensive lineman at the Combine this year. Had a really good number. I forget exactly what it was, but had a good
9.83.
There you go, 9.83 out of 10. Another freakishly athletic dude. I forget who it was. One of the analysts. It might have been Louis Riddick who said that out of all the there's no better offensive lineman athletically in this year's draft than Blake Freeland. And Chap, the Colts need something there on the edge to be a backup, to not have a string of who's nobodies, literally who's who, like behind your 2 starters. And really, we could argue we have that you still need starting caliber level reserves to push the starters at least. I don't know if Freeland is that, but he gives you another body in there that I think has the potential to be a contributor in the NFL there in the 4th round.
Well, the concern, because of the way they've handled the position all off season, is Freeland is basically your default backup swing tackle.
Right.
He just is, because who else? That's what they've done. I'm a little nervous if he has to be that swing tackle as a rookie. We saw how Bernhard Raimann took time
as a 3rd round pick.
As a 3rd round. Now I realize, Raimann had the thin resume at tackle, but to expect anybody, any draft pick to come in 3rd round, 4th round, whatever, and play significant minutes, maybe they're ready for it. Makes me a little nervous, but this guy's got great upside, and he's going to be your swing guy until he challenges Braden Smith.
I think you could challenge Raimann. Why not? He's got the better profile for it. He's more athletic. He's got more length. His arms are a full inch longer to be able to get to those defensive ends. Raimann showed a lot of promise towards the end of last season, but no one should be crowning him the franchise left tackle.
They have competition on it.
And I agree that they do need more veterans on the offensive line. But the thing that, at least with Freeland, and I get the level of competition at BYU, it's not like he's coming from the SEC or anything like that, but he had 41 starts at college.
That matters, yeah.
So he does have experience in playing the position all 4 years. Pro Football Focus's second highest graded offensive tackle last year. So, he needs to get a little stronger. He's only 302. Maybe he could add another 10 pounds of muscle. Leverage is always going to be an issue with someone who's 6'8". It's going to be hard for those defensive ends who, those Von Millers who curl under you. That's always going to be something that he has to deal with. But I think at worst case scenario, you have a rock solid swing tackle who could maybe challenge for the starting position midway through the year if Ryman's struggling, or maybe next year.
Yeah. So there's round 4, pick 106. 4 picks later, round 4, pick 110. The Colts draft defensive lineman out of Northwestern, Adetomiwa Adebawore.
We needed a drum roll right there.
That's right, in order to make that pick. Adetomiwa Adebawore. I definitely had to look it up like 10 times to make sure I was saying it right, and heard him say it himself, which is always helpful. And if you're talking about athletic freaks, here's another one right here.
This might be the number one.
On defense, we'll call him the number one. We'll call Anthony Richardson number one on offense. He is 6'2", 282 pounds. A 282-pound man who runs a 40 at 4.49, which is ludicrous. And he plays defensive tackles where the Colts want to play. He played all across the defensive line for Northwestern. Chris Ballard says they like him at the 3 technique, which is the position DeForest Buckner plays.
Stand those two guys side by side and say they play the same position.
Yeah, and wow. Adebawore was...
Buckner's going to make him look small.
Yeah, he will, for real. Adebawore needs to, if he wants to be effective there at 282 pounds, he's going to have to get stronger, in my opinion. Like, you can't run a 4.49 in the defensive interior. And I hate to throw a wet blanket on anything. If there's one pick that I'm like, about, it might be this, to be perfectly honest. Because he seems like one that's numbers that doesn't, that's going to be difficult to translate at defensive tackle. Yes, right. Exactly. Like, I think he could be a 3-4 defensive end and I think be really effective. It's going to take a lot of work, which is not saying he won't. If he puts in the work and it falls well for him, maybe he can be an effective player in the NFL, but it's going to take a lot of work, especially for Adebawore to, I think, make an impact because like I said, you can't run 4.49 on the defensive interior. You just can't do it. There's somebody 2 inches in front of you. So you're going to have to take those athletic traits and make them work to your advantage. It's going to take him a while to learn how to do that is what I'm saying.
The good news is he also had a 1.61 10-yard split, which is just the first 10 yards of that 40, which is the best among D tackles.
Yes.
37-inch vertical, which was the best among D tackles. I mean, so he has a lot of explosion to his game, which will translate away.
It will.
He has that inside-outside flexibility, which is something the Colts have shown to value. Like, I think at worst, maybe he's that Tyquan Lewis who could be a rotational guy, rush the passer from the inside on third downs, and then maybe on obvious rushing downs, go play DN for you. But I think his development could be aided a lot if they just give him one position and let him focus on that. Let him focus on that 3 technique, learn behind Buckner. Buckner's 29. He's got 2 more years left on his contract, so he's still playing at an elite level. But you take an athletic freak like this in round 4 who people were talking about him going round 1 or 2 after he tested just because he's that athletic. I think he fell because he's a bit of a twinger. Is he a defensive end? Is he a D tackle? His production in college was never all that great. I think he had about 4 to 5 sacks each of the past 2 seasons. So he's just a great guy in round 4 with high athletic traits to add to your defensive rotation. I'm not sure how much we'll see him in his rookie season. I think that'll depend greatly on injuries. But he's a nice guy to kind of stash away and think, man, if he can get close to his potential, he could be a good player in another year or 2.
Yeah, just a player now, Chap, to have a role and to maybe come in occasionally. But obviously with Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner out front, you're not relying on a 4th-round pick. You hope to do anything serious. You just give him one small role and see if he can excel in that and then build on him from there.
That's what Ballard talked about. He likes to have, you need to have 8, 9, maybe 10 reliable people on the defensive line because they rotate. So, yeah, he's probably more of a, I hate to use the word project, but he's a guy that you need to develop more than maybe someone else that you drafted.
On to round 5 at pick 138, the Colts draft cornerback, their second corner in this draft, Darius Rush out of South Carolina. He's 6'2", 195 pounds, so another tall corner, just in the same mold, similar mold to Juju Brents. What's different about Rush is his speed. He runs a 4.36 40-yard dash, which is incredibly fast for a 6'2". 35-inch vertical, 10-foot 1-inch broad jump. He played wide receiver at first when he went to South Carolina. He was actually a quarterback back in high school and started the last 2 years. So he's the only guy we didn't get to talk to on draft night out of all 12 of these guys. So I can't say I too much about him. But I know that Ballard said that he liked him, and you throw him in there, he's going to compete as well. And there's room to compete at cornerback on this roster right now.
Yeah, another guy who fits the Gus Bradley mold, really just getting his kind of players at the position. And he's another guy who people thought he was going to go higher in the draft. Folks thought he could maybe be a 3rd or 4th round pick. He falls to round 5, and kind of perfectly worked out for the Indianapolis Colts because they get another guy who fits the scheme, high-end athlete, 2 years starting. So it's not – I think everyone on here has except maybe their last pick, Jake Witt, and obviously Anthony Richardson, has at least 2 years as a starter. So hopefully they'll be able to contribute in some fashion right away.
That brings us to the second pick for the Colts in round 5 at 150. After a trade, the Colts traded down a little bit in round 5, and they added a 7th-round pick, I believe. So later in round 5, they'd select safety Daniel Scott out of California. 6'1", 208 pounds. He'll be 25 years old in October. He is not a spring chicken. He stuck it out there at Cal, played a couple of years, took his COVID year, I think, and just got a ton of experience. So you're asking about experience. Scott has a lot of that. He's a starter the last 2 years. He's a team captain. I expect him to be more of a special teams type player, certainly for the Colts, Chap, because you got a couple really safeties that you like. You've got Blackman, you've got Rodney Thomas. You're hoping to have Nick Cross come along if you're the Colts. So those are 3 guys that you might want to rotate in here and there. To have any role for Daniel Scott on defense would be a little surprising to me, but to have him as, if he makes the roster in a specialist role, would be less surprising for sure. And then you see what he does a couple years down the road. But he's a guy that also tested well. And you said earlier there was somebody here on this that you said tested well athletically, but maybe not.
Daniel Scott was
Right.
the one that they pointed to. And when he was drafted, a lot of guys in the room who had done their work said, this looks like a core special team player.
Right.
And it's what, how a lot of these guys are early on will have to make it.
Right.
And that's they're probably going to maybe retool the special teams with the new coordinators. So, that's where maybe the athletic traits really come out. The run and hit type of guys is special teams. They will get the chances because this team has had traditionally strong elite special teams players, and they need to find some guys in this draft and the younger players from the previous draft.
Yeah, it might have been someone else because Scott had a 9.94 RAS score.
There you go, exactly.
His 40, 10-yard sprint and vertical were all top 5 among safeties. So I think this is another athletic player who can contribute right away on special teams, and then maybe a year or two down the road could be a solid safety. I mean, I don't think he'll ever be like a superstar. Obviously, he was a 5th-round pick, but you need good special teams men, and you need depth at safety.
What was perhaps the most intriguing pick, I think, one of the more intriguing picks in this draft, certainly on day 3, the Colts' 3rd pick in the 5th round, was tight end Will Mallory out of Miami. If you talk about a glut of talent or a glut of players at one position, it would be tight end on this Colts roster. Mallory is 6'4", is definitely more of a receiving than a blocking tight end, or at least that's what he was known for at Miami. Ran a 4.45, which is the fastest 40 among all tight ends.
I wrote that wrong. It's 4.54.
Golly, Joe.
My dyslexia.
Son of a gun. Okay. Well, fastest 40 is still
It's
among
still the
tight ends.
fastest
Still
40.
fastest. Yeah, exactly. 4.54
That
is
part
really
was correct.
Yes, it's still pretty darn fast for a tight end. But Chap, when you look at the Colts roster, you see obviously Mo Alley-Cox, Kylan Granson, you see Jelani Woods, Alec Ogletree, Pharaoh Brown, and now Will Mallory. This is a position that is going to be
Pharaoh Brown.
It's going to be very competitive in fall camp. I would not be surprised if it turns into one or two of these players get traded for a 5th-round pick next year, sometime in fall camp. But Will Mallory right now is a Colt, and we'll see if he can do some damage this year and show his receiving abilities and maybe be competitive to Kylan Granson, who kind of has that position right now as the Colts' more H-back type tight end.
We talked about through Frank Wright's career here that it was a very tight ends friendly offense. I think we saw less and less of that because
of how they block.
But you go back to Eric Ebron, where they turned. We were there for the Eric Ebron era.
It was incredible while it lasted.
And I think they would really like to use that guy. We saw flashes of it with Jaylon and a little bit with Kylan Granson. They want to get to where they've got a tight end that they can use in the pass game. The question is, who's your blocking tight end? Pharaoh Brown is, but I think Mo Ali Cox has been up and down in blocking, as he'd probably tell you. So it's going to be a real interesting training camp on how they evaluate these guys.
Yeah, I think the only tight end that's safe is Jelani Woods. I mean, he was a 3rd-round pick, another athletic freak. Maybe compared to this draft class, he'd fit right in, but certainly the most athletic player they drafted last year. And I expect a big jump from him this season, but I think Ali Cox and Pharaoh Brown will kind of compete for that veteran tight end, that blocking tight end role. And then it's Ogletree, Granson, and then Mallory who are going to compete for that other tight. I mean, they got so many. Don't you think they probably keep 4?
I would
they
definitely
generally
think
keep
so.
4.
Yes.
But keep in mind, 53-man roster and then a 15 or 16-man practice squad. So it's really a 69-man roster. But and they move guys up and around, so they'll keep more. But they'll keep probably at least 3, maybe 4 on the active roster.
Round 5, pick 176, the Colts. I did want to mention that Will Mallory is the grandson of Bill Mallory, longtime IU football coach as well. The Colts' 4th and final 5th-round pick is our running back Evan Hall out of Northwestern. 5'10", 209 pounds, kind of a compact style runner. Turns 23 years old in October. And he's a pass catcher, which the Colts need after the departure of Nyheim Hines. He caught 55 passes in 2022 for 550 yards nearly, had 221 rushes for 913 yards, 7 total touchdowns, had the most catches among running backs in college football, Joe notes right here. That's, like I said, the Colts... again, fitting a need right here with Evan Hall, with what they have in the backfield.
Yep, and one of 2 players to have 500 rushing and 500 receiving yards last year. So I loved this pick. He's also athletic, 4'4", 740, 37-inch vertical, 5'3", 10-yard split. So he's a guy who can do a little bit of damage. Obviously, he's no Jonathan Taylor in terms of explosiveness. Few are. But he fits that 3rd down role Chris Ballard talked about. He's like, he can really catch the football. He's good in pass pro. He can contribute on special teams. So the Colts need a 3rd down back, and Hull certainly has the opportunity to be that based on what he showed in college.
Colts had one pretty good 5th-round pick out of Northwestern a couple years ago, and Anthony Walker Jr., the linebacker, so hoping to get some similar production here from Evan Hall in his career in Indianapolis. Let's blaze through these last 3. A 6th-round pick, Titus Leo, a defensive end out of Wagner, who's actually the Colts' 2nd player out of Wagner on their roster. Chris Williams, the defensive end also, or defensive tackle, also went to Wagner. I'll bet you didn't know that there are 2 players from Wagner on the Colts roster. Res Pro Day ran a 4.4940, so pretty fast dude. Leo was
mess that up again, 4.69.
Golly, Joe.
I know. I
was about to say 4.49 is pretty darn fast.
Picks,
they did. You're just moving all these things together. Hey, Leo was a Buck Buchanan Award finalist in 2021 for the best defensive player in all of FCS. So that's pretty darn good. I think he had 32.5 tackles for loss the last 2 years. Has definitely had some good stats shown in the backfield. This is more of a Leo role. His name is Titus Leo. He will play the Leo, exactly.
Yeah, that Ngakwe, smaller, quicker D-end role. So he's a project player, but...
As everyone is right now.
Yeah, everyone in these rounds.
Yeah, and round 7, 2 picks, cornerback Jaylon Jones out of Texas A&M and offensive tackle Jake Witt out of Northern Michigan. Witt, in particular, tested really highly athletic. Like I told you earlier, had a great RAS score, so that's why I eyed him in my all-RAS draft earlier. And Jaylon Jones, another corner to compete there, had the 2nd best 3-cone number at the combine and the 2nd best 10-yard split.
6'2".
There you go, at 6'2". Again, so they had 3 cornerbacks, 6'2", 6'2", 6'3", exactly what you would expect from Chris Ballard and for Gus Bradley there on the outside. And then, like, you want to bring in guys and see who sticks. Like, especially for a position where there's so much, it seems like, Chap available right there. Like you like Isaiah Rodgers, you like what Dallas Flowers showed briefly last year, but you need some competition there. And I think adding all three of these guys will bring out the best among them. And at least one of these five guys is going to be a cornerback here on the Colts for a long time.
And again, they still may go out and they should go out and bring in a veteran free agent.
Yeah.
Rock Ya-Sin.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that.
Uh-huh.
So, but again, it's they needed to sign to reinforce the corner room because they created the voids there. They traded Stephon Gilmore. They didn't re-sign Brandon Faison. So, but no, you want to get younger, and it's going to be really fascinating to watch the competition in training camp at that position because it's, you've got a couple guys that are proven. Kenny Moore is going to be motivated, and we talked to him today, and he's motivated to sort of, take care of unfinished business here. Last year wasn't a good year, so I think we sort of knew that the defense might suffer a little bit while you're trying to focus on the offense, but cornerback, this is still as thin a room experience-wise as I can remember in a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because I think I'm excited to watch them doesn't mean I think that it's a strength. You could be excited about something and realize that it's not a strength on the team. So I think it's going to be fun if you get the chance to head out to Westfield and watch some training camp this year to see some of these young cornerbacks in action. I do. So there have also been undrafted free agent signings. We're not going to get into that too much other than to say the Colts apparently have signed guard Emil Ekiyor Jr. out of Cathedral High School, started for Alabama in their national championship year. Some people thought he was going to be drafted in round 4, round 5, and then I saw him in plenty of mocks seemed to go that way, but 6'2", 314 pounds. He made it all the way through the draft, was not taken. I don't know why, because I'm not a scout, and I'm not in those rooms.
There's a reason.
Exactly. He made 40 starts at Alabama, for crying out loud. Like, how does that guy not get drafted? But the Colts certainly need help on the interior again, at least as a reserve, maybe even in a starter's role. So we'll see where he slots in. I would not be surprised that right now if he makes the roster, but of course there could be additions through all that.
Right now he's the backup right guard.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right now he makes the roster, that's for sure. Yeah, yikes.
Like, I'm excited about this guy. He seems like he has potential, but when an undrafted free agent's your backup right guard, woof.
All right, I promised overall draft grade, so we'll do that before we wrap things up and kick some of these other things till next week. So overall draft grade I'll go first, then Joe, and then Chap can wrap things up. I thought this was a great draft. You never know. Like that's why I always have to add that. Like you don't know how these guys are going to pan out, but I think you drafted a lot of guys to be excited about. I think that Richardson was the best choice, what you had there at the time. I really like the Downs pick, like I said. Drafting 3 cornerbacks, I'll bet one of them hits. And then if you get one more, that's like 4 contributors in one draft, which is fantastic if you get 4 contributors to your team in one draft. So I'm going to go with an A- because I really do like what they did. I don't love giving out A's, honestly, when I'm in draft because they're just so... It's so fickle. You never really know what's going to happen. But I really like this one. I thought that there were some guys that are going to be really intriguing players and guys that can contribute right away. And like I said, I really do like the Downs pick. I keep coming back to that, but I think he's going to be a good, unique player for them for the years to come. So, Joe, what do you think about this draft?
I gotta give it A+. Obviously, they took my guy Anthony Richardson, so that would at least get it to an A-.
I mean, it doesn't matter. They could trade away every other pick.
No, I thought it was great. It was one of the few drafts where I just kept going through. It was like, love that pick, love that pick, love that pick. Usually, there's a few where it's a bit of a head scratcher, but I'm like, all right. I mean, you know more than I do. This was not one of those. Just the overall athleticism. Richardson, Brents, Downs, even I love the next 3 picks, Freeland, Adebawore, Darius Rush. Like, I think all those guys can develop into starters. And so just they hit needs with high upside, highly athletic players who should, at least a couple, should be able to contribute right away. Maybe the first 3 picks, able to contribute greatly right away. And the only knock on it is they didn't address guard. But, hopefully they'll be able to sign a veteran to shove in there at guard.
Yeah, I would probably say B+. To me, the only way you can really grade a draft immediately is you looked at what you perceived to be their needs, and I think most of us agreed what the needs were, and did they address it with people, with
bodies,
with bodies at that position, and we can argue whether that body is who you would have put there in round 2, 3, or 4, and they did. I would like to have seen a guard as well, but not at the expense of a quarterback, a corner, a receiver, or a tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So getting a guard in round 5 or 6, I'm not sure how that would have made me feel better. And I think, I'll defer to you guys, but primarily to Joe about these draft picks and what they are, what they can be. The only thing that matters is, were they right with Richardson? They can be right with 11 of these guys, and these guys are going to be guys who play their rookie contracts in 4 years, and of course, being more than Ben Bannock, who did the same thing, but guys who contribute. But if the quarterback's not the guy, what do you got? So I hope it is. I hope the quarterback's the right guy, because we've been through quarterback revolving door ad nauseum. They've got to get away from that. And if Richardson is the right guy, then this is a grand slam draft, but only if Richardson is a guy.
And he could be a grand slam, and everyone else can be a dud and be Ben Bannigo, and you still look back and be like, well, they got the quarterback.
You got the quarterback. For 10, 12 years, you got your guy.
Yep. So I completely agree. It hinges on Richardson. And
it should. So does Carolina. Mm-hmm. So does Houston.
Yep.
So did Kansas City with Mahomes. If you're right, you're right. If you're not, you're Jacksonville going through Bortles and Gabbert and all these guys. Get the guy, and he makes everything possible. We talked to so many guys, Irsay and the scouts and all this, and so in Dodds, and so the names run together with what they said, but one of them said, you want to get the guy that you don't want to face. And if this guy is that guy, you're looking at a Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts type of guy that is a defense you don't want to face, and that gives you hope.
Well, we're in store for a really intriguing season of Colts football coming up, and we'll be here to deliver it to you on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. We appreciate you listening this week. We encourage you to subscribe to get us delivered to your podcast listening device as soon as it drops. Follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone for news and notes throughout the week. Mike Chappell is at mchappell51. For Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. You can follow me at DaveG_sports. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.